Gives me great pleasure to introduce a young lady who's been with the Big E for a few years, Noreen Tassinari. She is Director of Marketing for the Eastern States Exposition and has been so for past 27 years. She's responsible for corporate communications, public relations, advertising, and I had to figure this out, ESE's, Eastern States Exposition's website and social media. Staff program, training programs, information services, and lost people operation. Do you lose many people? Okay. The marketing department is the keeper of ESE's historical documents, and she's going to tell you about the table over there. She currently serves as a member of the board of directors of the West of the River Chamber of Commerce, the Valley Press Club, the Rotary Club of West Springfield, where she is public relations chair, related to work, and St. Thomas of the Apostle School in West Springfield. She's a former library trustee for the town of West Springfield and past president of the Women's Partnership of the Chamber. She is married. Her husband, John, is an IT guy, as she said to me. She has two sons. One is a Navy pilot-to-be, very shortly, I guess. He's doing his first solo flight today, tomorrow, whatever. And her other son works for EMC Dell in global sponsorship. She is also a skier and likes to travel. If we could give a warm Rotary welcome to our speaker and a fellow Rotarian, Noreen Tassinari.
Thanks, everybody. It's so great to be with you, and I'm going to keep an eye on the time as well. Thank you, Bill. And it's great to be able to share a little bit of the exposition's history with you today. Of course, we just celebrated our 101st Big E, closed our doors on Sunday. We had a record year, and for that, I'm very, very grateful. We had some weather concerns. We had hurricanes off the coast. We had a couple of really, really hot days, not like September. I'm grateful that it was a good year and especially a safe year, too, because we all woke up Monday morning with the sad news out of Las Vegas, and that's just devastating. And it's something, to be honest with you, it's something people in the big event business think about every single day, and we take a lot of steps that I won't get into to prevent these kinds of things from happening in our area, but we're grateful for the fair that we had. So let's take a little trip through the decades, and I'm just going to point out a couple things before we start. This is a book that was produced for us last year in conjunction with our centennial with the cooperation of Wayne Faniff, who is the author. I wrote a couple of the passages in here, and if you'd like one of these books, there are order forms on that tall table, in addition to some great photography, just some old pictures that I happen to bring along with me if you'd like to take a look at them. So let's jump right in. This is our founder, Joshua Brooks. He was a descendant of two of the early governors in Boston. He was a student at Boston University. He had a football injury, and he decided to leave school and start his own business. It was called Brooks Banknote Company. He spent all of his savings on a gold sign that said Brooks Banknote Company in Boston. And he ran into some problems in Boston. He decided he was fighting with the government. He took his business to Springfield, became the largest employer in Springfield. His company was located in what's now Mason Square. It's a giant of a building. It just burned down in 2016, Wayne Faniff had told me. But he was quite influential. He had the idea, as he got to know a little bit more about Springfield business and agriculture, that he wanted to have an event that married industry and agriculture at that time. And he had his sights set on a parcel of swampy hayfield off Route 147, off the Agawam River, which is now the Westfield River. And this is his idea of what the exposition should look like. If you probably can't see, but up in the fields, that's actually Agawam, as you probably can guess. There's a dirigible in that picture. So he was really kind of ahead of his time and forward thinking. He was a charismatic individual who, a real visionary. The first event that he chose to have at the exposition was the National Dairy Show. And that's dairy country, nobody goes east of dairy country. But he managed, with the help of a lot of people whose names you may recognize, Horace Moses, the first Albert Steiger, Theodore Vail, who was in charge of AT&T out of New York City. They're all part of this exposition movement. They went to Chicago, convinced the board of the National Dairy Show to bring their event here to the exposition. At that time, they didn't have a facility. This was January 1916. In 9 months' time, they built all the buildings. First, they raised $750,000, which is the equivalent of $13 million in 2016 dollars. Built the 4 buildings and established the fairgrounds. What you see here is the first arch of the Coliseum, our landmark building. 10 arches went up in 10 days. I can't imagine. You can see kind of the horses and the carriages there in the picture up there. It made the national news. It was heralded in the New York Times even that this had occurred. So the Coliseum, you can see it in some of its later days where it was festooned with a lot of decorations. So that show, the National Dairy Show, took place in 1916. There's $1 million worth of cattle. It was the largest showing ever at the National Dairy Show, and it featured a life-size cow made of butter. I don't know how they kept it cold, but there's more about that as we go down the road here. In 1918, the grounds were closed because it was World War I. 1919, Mr. Brooks convinced the Massachusetts legislature to build the Massachusetts Building. A building, it's owned by the government, run by the government, and features, the best of that particular state. And as we move through the decades, more and more states added their own buildings through his influence. The final building, the Rhode Island building, in 1957. So they were being built throughout the 20th century. Now here's a snapshot of our average fairgoer at the time. I'm sorry that you can't really see this, but they don't look like the people that I saw out my window last week or so with the short shorts and the torn this and the, drinking beers, walking around type of thing. They're all decked out. The children had dresses on. The men had coats on and hats, and the women with their, with their nice attire. And what's also different is they would bring their picnic lunch and they'd sit and they'd eat it. And another thing that's, can show you the times that the littering, they just kind of left everything there. So now with Keep America Beautiful movement in the 60s, we don't see any of that. We have sweepers and scrubbers that go around at night and sweep not only the exposition fairgrounds, but our side streets as well. So it's just kind of an interesting look at society at that time. If you look out past that picture, you can see very tall pillars. Those were the entryways to the exposition. That's where the Brooks Administration Building, where my office is now located. And Jimmy, of course, you're familiar with that for sure. But I love those pillars, and I wish we still had them. The Coliseum, of course, agriculture, we're founded on agriculture. Agriculture is a major part of what we do. This is one of the big bands of that era that packed the Coliseum. There's some things never change, biggie parking jam in the parking lot. The big old cars kind of wedged in there. And you can't really see that, but admission was 50 cents. I'm thinking that was 1929 because the New Hampshire building isn't there yet, and the Vermont building was built in 29. This is Helen Storrow. She was the first woman trustee of Eastern States Exposition. She founded Storrowton Village. Many of you have been to Storrowton Tavern or seen the beautiful village. She was the chairman of the home department. Her husband, the Storrow Drive in Boston, is named for that family, highly influential folks in Boston. She was chairman of the home department. She was working out of tents, and she wanted actual houses to demonstrate some of the home cooking and canning techniques. But she was also ahead of her time. She had a demonstration of what became the fax machine. And she also helped women learn how to vote. She put a whole voting station in, so they had the right to vote. They weren't going to ask their husbands, well, what do you do? Push the lever. So she showed them how to do it. So she was quite the entrepreneur. It's an example of just a rug show in the village, which is they just laid out the handmade rugs right on the green. And this is our old cattle barn. I'm sure you remember that, Jim, what we called bee barn. And that was one of the first buildings that was built. It was replaced in 1978 with the Young Building. The funny thing about this, we called it the Cow Palace, because, that's kind of a cool thing. And we received notification of cease and desist from the actual Cow Palace in San Francisco that read about it in some obscure sheep journal. So we had to change the name. Here's some early Vermonters in the Vermont building with their product. They don't look very happy, but we were happy because we love Vermont and we love their maple products for sure. So this was our grandstand behind the Coliseum. Auto racing took place around that track for many years. We'll keep an eye on that grandstand because it's not going to be there for long, because in 1936, the Great Flood of 1936 hit in March, a spring thaw. The exposition received extensive damage. Water was as high as 18 feet. If you go to the exposition today and you stand in front of the Coliseum and you look up, you can see the high water marks. If you go to Storyton Village, in the church, you can see the high water marks, and it was pretty tough. But what it led to, Joshua Brooks, our founder, worked with the Army Corps of Engineers and helped get the dike system put up. And it's a darn good thing because 2 years later, the hurricane of '38 hit right smack in the middle of the run of the exposition. It was September 21st. That's a piece of the grandstand that fell down. These are 3 Ferris wheels that became twisted around each other. And of course, the exposition was, going full tilt, and it stopped dead, and its finances were in shambles. But Mr. Brooks, with the help of a lot of people in the Springfield area, raised the money so that the exposition could continue. Eddie Shore came into our lives and brought hockey to the Coliseum in the form of the Springfield Indians. He was one of the first owners of the Ice Capades as well. His son, Ted Shore, who's still with us, very active, many of you may know him. He met his wife, Edie. She was a skater in Capades, and he, of course, was working in the Coliseum. And they've had, the Shores have had profound influence on hockey in New England. The rink rats, the young kids who helped in the rink and showed them the way and taught them how to skate, and many of the greatest hockey players have come out of this area. World War II hit, and again, the exposition did not take place for 5 years. That's the Coliseum. I always thought in my early days of the exposition that, these are, guns and munitions, but no, it's Red Cross material, textiles, parachutes that were stored to the ceiling in the Coliseum. At one point, you see the light streaming in, and from those old pictures, all of the windows were painted dark because of the fear of air raid. So I really missed all that natural light as well. Again, piled to the ceiling with lots of goods. The interesting thing about that era was, the military kind of trashed the grounds, the kids today would say. And the exposition was getting, a stipend from the government for their use, and they weren't too eager to sort of get their grounds back. But it was Eddie Shore who wasn't able to have his hockey game, so he put his foot down, and eventually we received the grounds back in our name. Trolleys, people would hop on a trolley and come down Memorial Avenue and right here to the exposition's front gate. Again, some auto racing, which was huge, and that continued until the 60s. We had racing. This is a look at what the grounds looked like before the storage and tent went in, before the Rhode Island building, so it's sometime in the 50s. And these are the latest washer and dryer that were presented to the housewife in the Westinghouse display in the Industrial Arts Building, which became the Better Living Center in 1961. And this is the world's first smoothie here at the exposition. It's called Drink a Banana, so, certainly something that's part of our lives now. That I love the name Drink a Banana. Probably the late 40s for that one. We had a number of stars that were part of what we do, part of our history. Roy Rogers, Arthur Godfrey. Arthur Godfrey had a tremendous relationship with our Biggie Horse Show, and was an announcer. And I found an old film when I first started from the 50s, and Arthur Godfrey, it's the show window of the East. He was a narrator for our film. Liberace, he's pictured with J. Loring Brooks in the background, and Governor Volpe and his wife. And Governor Volpe is on crutches, which you can barely see. And we looked at that picture a million times, and finally someone said, the governor's on crutches. So he's showing them how to do the twist. President Eisenhower visited us in 1953. He's meeting with the winner of the baby beef contest, which is the 4-H beef contest that continues to this day. I get Google alerts whenever there's something that's written about the exposition anywhere. Google sends me a little notification. That young man passed away in 2016 at the age of 84. He was a successful attorney in the Rhinebeck, New York area. In his obituary, he mentioned, number one, winning the baby beef contest at the Big E. Number two, having the opportunity to show his steer to President Eisenhower. Here he is walking the grounds. I mean, it's just kind of cool and casual compared to today's world. And 1959, the Stoughton Tent. Does anybody remember seeing any of the shows at the Stoughton Tent? It was Theater in the Round. We had Robert Goulet was here. Joey Heatherton was here. My Fair Lady was the first presentation. And a lot of happy, happy memories. So this is the Big E Sky Ride, which I remember from my youth in a big way. And as I began to do research on our history, I learned that this went up in 1969 and was dismantled following the 1973 fair. And I can't imagine what we go through now, a capital project like this for 5 fairs. So I don't know what the story is. I wish we still had it. I'd like to bring it back. Wisconsin has one. The Big East Giant Slide went in 1967. It was located right at our front gate. It was really easy for me to say, take a left at the Giant Slide if you're trying to find my office, Bill. We began working more closely with our neighbors in West Springfield, and we learned from our neighbors they considered it an eyesore. So we moved the slide and put beautiful plantings throughout our half-mile frontage. So here's, it's down behind, you know, the circus tent, the opposite side of the Better Living Center. Friendly's had a couple of locations on the fairgrounds, and take a look at that cupola because you'll be seeing that again down the road a little bit. In 1978, we hit the million mark for the first time in attendance. And I was part of the fair, but I don't really remember this incident, but George Jones is our former general manager, and we knew it was going to happen around this time. He found the cutest little kid, and he was the millionth visitor. And that young man received a gold pass, which are very good. Occasionally we give out gold passes. Every year he comes to the fair with his gold pass. I mean, what you're supposed to do with the gold pass is we send you tickets so you can get in and you can have your pass framed. And we tried to find him last year for the centennial, but this year he showed up in our new historic museum exhibit. So he's in his 40s now and still comes every year apparently. 1980 was a big year. We had the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders as our featured attraction, and we introduced our mascot, Biggie, and you know, you can see his image in a lot of the things we do, and we could never figure out what exactly he was, if he's a bear, a chipmunk, and so on and so forth. He's cute. 1997, we celebrate our 75th anniversary, and I was in charge of everything to do with that, including another book that we produced that I didn't bring, and I brought back the butter cow. So there it is. We had to build a refrigerated case. The man on the far left is the butter sculptor who's with us to this day. He lives in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. He also works in chocolate and cheese, for your information. And every year we have a different butter sculpture. This year it was all the Big E foods. Other things, lots of other things. The woman in the front, Grace Brooks Knibb, the granddaughter of our founder, Joshua Brooks. She's no longer with us. She's a longtime horsewoman and trustee from Rhode Island. In 2000, we introduced the Mardi Gras Parade. We thought it would last like 1 or 2 years. Well, you know, it took on a life of its own. A little bit of the Big E's, right at the Big E. 2001, we opened 3 days after 9/11. And if we had another half hour, I could explain to you what that was, but it was a very, very difficult time making the decision, do we open, do we not open? The certain fairs, some remain open, some were closed. Disney World was closed. There were no flights. There was nothing on TV. We did decide to open, thankfully, and people came together. There was a huge display of patriotism. We sold out of every flag we possibly had on the fairgrounds and kept ordering more. And people needed to be with each other and It was very, very intense time for sure. The following year, we introduced the Biggie Cream Puff, and the year after that, the Biggie Eclair. And the Crazy Burger came in 2009. Of course, that is a hamburger on a donut instead of a bun. Everybody's favorite. If anybody's had one here, you probably won't admit it. But it's great fun. And that was where we took off with social media. We had a contest to name the thing on Facebook. We were newly involved in Facebook, early adopters, like 2008. And that sort of put us on the map, and news of the Crazy Burger spread around the world. It started with the New York Daily News, picked up on it, and it went around the world, India, Australia, you name it. These are contemporary food items. The deep fried martini, everybody's favorite. Dinner in a cone by our friends at Westside, the Agawam Lions Club, and that's a chocolate baconana, a frozen banana dipped in chocolate, bacon, and some sort of nuts. So this year we introduced on the left the Flatliner, the West Springfield Lions Club. 2 hamburgers, French fries, chili, cheese, bacon, and something else maybe. And a deep fried holy cannoli on the right, which was really quite good. There's no, the Biggie's kind of landlocked, you know, a highway, a river, so we know where to go out, so we've gone up. The Martini Bar is now Sky Bar. Clem Martone got this amazing tent. If that hurricane did happen to hit, I think the grounds would have been wiped out except for that tent. You should see it's steel reinforced, unbelievable. So certainly all the crazy things we do with food and with entertainment, we bring the people in the gate, we teach them where their foods come from. Agriculture is still the heart and soul, the DNA of the exposition. And it's not just cows and sheep, it's wine and cheese too. So we have a wine and cheese barn in our agriculture area as well. Selfie station, there's our mascot. You can take your picture with him in our frame, hashtag it. And drones fly around all the time now. It's a great shot of our midway taken by our drone. And again, that's the book that we just spoke of. And these are some quick shots of our centennial exhibit from last year. We replicated those pillars that I like so much that were our entry points way back when. And Joshua Brooks and the building of the Coliseum. Lots of memorabilia that people donated to us as well. And the Sky Ride, that's depicted too. And those are the gables from the Friendlies. Someone found them in a dumpster. We do a lot of dumpster diving because you don't want to throw anything away. And I think you recognize this young man. He's an East Long Meadow icon, I would say. Peter Gray, Pete Sweets. He built us a 10-layer cake, 11-layer, one for each decade, and a whole scale, actual size food, which is in the middle there. You can see the cream puff and popcorn and things like that. So he was part of our centennial. Love the guy. Lego got involved with these beautiful murals. And this year, it's always been my dream to have a museum of our archives. I'm kind of in charge of all that, and they're scattered throughout. So we now have a museum. That's the Hampden County building. We called it A Walk Through History. Some of the elements that were just in the other pictures, Gerard Kieran's giving some kids from Long Meadow High a tour. Our entertainment, Staunton Village is represented. Ted Shore has that little nook about hockey. The Sky Ride car is now a little photo opportunity. The arms open, you can sit and have your picture taken. So we had a record. As I said in the beginning, we're really, really grateful for that. We're grateful that people came and enjoyed what we have to offer here at the exposition. And hopefully you can all join us next year, September 14 through 30. And if there's any questions, I think we're okay on time. Okay. Yes.
Two things. Without being too nosy, how long have you worked?
How long have I worked there? So it's my 40th fair this year. I started as a college intern. I was a journalism major. I was writing for the public relations department and fell in love with the business. I got to meet Johnny Cash. We had a press conference for Johnny Cash. I'm like, whoa, what am I going to do after this? So 2 years later, I was made a full-time person, public relations coordinator. And my boss and mentor was Betsy Sheehan Taylor, whom people may remember. And she left in 1990. And so I took over. I was expecting my son, the naval pilot, to be 5 months pregnant. They gave me the job, and so been my whole life.
One of the reasons I ask is because my father-in-law, who passed away in 1981, was chairman of the board of the Rotary. His name was Bob Burton.
Oh, okay.
And the second thing is, I played in my last hockey game on the council.
Oh, no kidding. Good for you. Yeah, there's so many. There you go. There's so many stories. What we went through when we took the ice out of the Coliseum, there's nobody here with West Springfield roots, but that was just.
Ted and Evie had the last game.
They did. We had that event. We had yep. That was really special, 1991.
How much money does Big E and the off-season shows bring to Western Mass, Northern Connecticut area?
The economic impact of what we do year-round is $479 million. I work with REMI, Regional Economic Model, Inc., on cameras to figure out our economic impact. And that's the easiest way for me to describe it is the ripple effects of what we do here. The number of jobs that are generated, the number of, it's tourism, based on tourism dollars, people that come to our facility, come to West Springfield, stay in the hotel rooms, eat at the restaurants, buy gas, sundries, things like that. So they have a model that they put all this money, these calculations in, and that's the economic impact of the facility. Is someone over here?
Yeah, I was just wondering, has it always been the same time of year?
That's an excellent question. Originally, it was held in October, and Mr. Brooks, in the early 20s, examined the weather charts for the previous 100 years and moved it to September, and it's rained ever since.
Well, this year was great.
This year was excellent, but back then, the weather charts they had weren't what we have now, so it's funny that they moved it. And a lot of the fairs take place in the summer months where the kids don't have to go back to school. So we're kind of a day fair as opposed to a night fair. Yes.
I know at one time the Hard Rock Cafe or Hard
Yes.
Rock, I looked at the Big
Yes.
E for casino,
That's true.
which didn't work out. But do they still have any influence in the property or
Not
in the
at
fair at all?
Not at all. If you folks remember in 2013, we were working with Hard Rock. They saw this as an opportunity. MGM was, they were voting on who it was going to be, MGM or I can't remember the other one now. They looked at our facility. They looked at our 13-acre Gate 9 parking area and thought it might work. They did a lot of work. The town needed to vote to pass that. We did a ton of work, PR within the town. It was voted down, and they basically are gone, and they have nothing to do with this now. That year during the fair, they had an exhibit in our Young building because we all expected that it would. Well, we all hoped it would pass, and half expected that it would. So that chapter is closed. Thanks for asking.
You have time for another question or two if you want.
Yeah.
Do a lot of the exhibitors and also the vendors come, they hit a circuit?
They
I
do.
know that the New York State Fair is,
It's true.
I think, the 2 weeks before.
Labor Day.
Is that where they mostly come from?
Some of them do, yes, for sure. And yes, there is a circuit. And Syracuse is on that circuit. They close on Labor Day. So some will come actually many days early and sort of, hang out till the Big E starts. Our fair in particular has a lot of local vendors. We've been trying to grow our local business over the past few years. For instance, Frigo has their 1-pound meatball over in our food court. Carol DeLevo with all the sweet things. So there are a lot of local people as well. And other folks that we've brought from, say, the Wisconsin area or Minnesota, we try to visit a lot of different fairs. Every time we go to a fair, you get some ideas. You can tell fair people because they're taking pictures of trash cans and bathroom signs, even in Walt Disney World. But we all learn from each other, and we try to grow, especially the food business too.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.